This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, November 30th, 2023, and I have the awesome Miles Franklin from the TikTok and YouTube world. Hi, Miles. How are you?
I'm doing good. I wish it was a little bit brighter outside right now, but you know what? It is what it is.
You're looking pretty bright to me. I'm facing a window and has a lot of light. I have to crank the brightness on my MacBook to max here. But listen, I wanted to have you on to talk about this week's news. There's a bunch of phones coming out in China that will eventually make it to North America, or the West at least, not necessarily North America. But anyway, because the chips came out early this year, so they're starting to trickle out. There's some OnePlus 12 news. That's going to definitely be interesting to us. But I also want to kind of pick your brain and get your story and your experience around this whole, the teenagers apparently are flocking to iOS in droves. Android is being left behind. Will Saddleberg wrote an article about that. I'll put a link in the show notes. And I've observed this myself, but I'm wondering, you have a completely different age group as your audience. What are you seeing, happening out there with that?
So I have a worldwide audience that I feel that many creators might have if they're talking about tech. And I talk about it personally because in the westernized US society, we see a lot of this change in terms of people who are buying said devices. I think it was over 80% of my generation buying iOS devices compared to any person above the age range of like 25.
Right.
And it's been a problem that I've discussed, but many people outside the US don't see the problem at all because they're more reliant on different messaging services, if that might be WhatsApp or sometimes iMessage, not much, or pretty much any other internet messaging service. So they don't really see it, but I've been seeing it for the past 8 years, pretty much ever since iOS started implementing iMessage as their de facto messaging service. And the fact that when I think it was after the iPhone 4S when more people started getting iPhones in my generation, just because of the age and timing.
Yeah. So, to kind of summarize a little bit for the folks who are wondering what we're talking about, we're really talking about this iMessage divide that exists in North America primarily, right? Basically, the reason it seems that teenagers are on a majority on iOS devices right now, or iPhones, is because there's peer pressure. They don't want to be left out of the blue bubble, right? They want to be an iMessage user in North America, and in Canada, I see that as well. So that means that because of that, they're just not going to pick Android, right? Because that's just not going to give them some green bubbles. And, for somebody that's like me, has been around for years, I've seen peer pressure when I was in high school too, for other things, completely non-technological things, but I saw it too. And I'm kind of amazed that it's such a strong thing, but at the same time, I'm also not surprised. But I'm wondering, why do you think this is such a US thing? And why do you think, or rather, how do you think we can potentially break out of that, especially in light of Apple bringing RCS to the table soon? Although it won't be encrypted. So, and they've already said, I think they're going to keep the green bubble. So where do you see all this evolving? And, is there a solution? Should there be a solution? Do we care?
I'll go question by question. And I think the reason why in the US we have such a divide is just the inherent way kids of younger ages, I would say, digest content and how they see certain things in society. And if certain popular people are using certain devices, most likely those people will try to be using the same devices to be the same as they are. That's just, we're following the leader at this point. But that wasn't the only thing, because it almost became a joke to have a green bubble in any type of cultural relevancy. We see it in songs, we see it in shows, we see it in YouTube videos, we see it in any person talking about Android and iOS. It's like, oh, you got a green bubble. It's just what it is. And then add to the fact the green bubble would mean a worse messaging experience.
Let's face it, it is, right?
It's worse.
I'm mostly on Android. My spouse is mostly on iOS, and I see it. I'm actually really looking forward to RCS, even if it's not encrypted, just to get the high resolution photos.
Exactly. I think it's funny because that is a big part, right? And there's some other aspects, but this whole thing also went back to my own family. Definitely not in my generation, but me and my dad were on Android for a majority of the time, and they made me switch my dad to an iPhone mainly because they wanted to have the higher image resolution and video sharing. Just because when my dad wanted to send anything, it would be a pixelated mess.
Yeah.
And it would just be like, you need to switch. And keep in mind, half my family was on Android beforehand. They all slowly switched over, mainly because of that and other reasons why. But I think the biggest one was iMessage, because we want to share our memories in the best way possible without having to degrade our experiences and not be able to send things over the way we want it to be sent over. And that experience, even from Android to Android before RCS was enabled, was a thing we notice all the time. And people always come back to saying, it's like, well, I don't use iMessage, and this goes back to outside the US, but like majority of people in the US, they have that issue. But bringing it back to, I would say, my generation and how it goes about, as I was saying, they follow the leader. They want to have what's popular. But then you have to add to the fact that green bubbles would ruin text group chats and all that stuff. You couldn't add and get rid of it. That's a big one. That's a big one. I mean, people would still text me because I had an Android phone for a majority of my life. But they would straight up tell me, we didn't include you in this group chat because you're going to ruin it. And honestly, they were not wrong. They were not wrong.
No, I get it.
Because they couldn't add and get rid of people. Say somebody said something, I don't want them in the group chat anymore. They would have to start a whole new group chat if I was in it, and they would lose all their images, all their searches, everything. So it's just add on that on top. And then iMessage started implementing different services like Pigeon Games, which at that time would be like you playing games with other people at school. If you're bored, didn't have that. So it just slowly became a force that was pretty much unstoppable because everybody was switching to it.
How big is FaceTime part of that equation?
FaceTime, I feel like it was bigger back then, but I feel like every dang app nowadays has a video chat alternative. And I'm going to be honest with you, my FaceTime has been bugging out a lot. And I don't think it is as big as it was back then, but it was a big part back then. I mean, but I think the green and blue text bubbles, just the inherent differences between them, was a big push for many people.
I think you make a really good point about the fact that pre-RCS, the Android messaging experience sucked. And that was a big contributor, right? And also the group's chat features, as you mentioned. I think that I have a theory about why the rest of the world doesn't quite have the same polarization here. And it's because, I don't know if you know this, but in the rest of the world in the 90s, when GSM was starting to roll out the digital cell technology, 2G, messaging was the first like non-voice feature, right? And in the rest of the world, it was really expensive to do calls, but it was really cheap to text, SMS. And more importantly, anybody who received a text, it was free. Like, why would you be penalized? Somebody sends you a text. You shouldn't be ding 10 cents a message because that's how much it was back then, right? Because somebody randomly texted you. So in Europe and stuff, it was free to receive, pay to send, but way cheaper to send a single SMS than to spend the same amount of time talking on voice. So people, on their T9, remember predictive text? I don't know if you've had a chance to try this out. Even I never did this because I was not patient enough, right? But you're typing away, and people in Europe started doing that. And so very early on, they felt the need to send photos. MMS was invented. They sent photos, they sent videos, really crappy ones, because the phones had crappy cameras. But then what happened next was interesting, because they're like, okay, now we have data, we have 3G, right? So now we can actually create apps, right? Like WhatsApp, right? So they did that because they're like, well, this MMS stuff is crap. We can't send high quality. So they were there way before iMessage even existed. So they started adopting things like WhatsApp and whatever before, or in Japan, it was Line, in China, it was WeChat, way before we, the West, decided, oh, hey, this is cool, we should do it, right? Yeah, I think that's what.
I think going back to what you're saying is that I see a lot of people coming from different countries migrating to the US, or the same people are saying like, why do you guys not use I would say WhatsApp, or in this case WeChat, people are coming from China, and they look at us like we're kind of dumb. Like they're like, how could you not? You're like, this is inherently the better version of texting. But then,
because
as
it
you
works
said,
with everything.
it works with everything. But we didn't have that, nor did we use it at all until later on. But that's when iMessage was already becoming the de facto messaging service in our area or in our location. It's just crazy because I always kind of go back to how Apple was smart as can be to do that. They knew what would happen if that went down, but it really made me angry that Android itself didn't have their own version that I wouldn't say forced upon, but mandated on Android itself, knowing that we can see from our younger generation just buying habits of what was happening 6 years ago. If we just look at that, we have failed messaging services and all that back then too, but like it just goes it goes back to this whole thing. It's like lock you in.
I agree.
For
with
better,
you.
for worse.
I think Google tried multiple times but failed because they didn't have the momentum, because I don't know, there are a number of reasons. The manufacturers didn't include the app, the carriers didn't implement it properly. I think what made iMessage work so well is that it bypassed the carriers.
Yeah,
right? It says it's just data. And in a way, that's also how they actually broke text messaging. Like, I'm really actually mad at Apple, not for, well, it's sad that we're in a situation where young people especially feel, pushed towards having an iOS and an iPhone, right? Like, because of the shame of the green bubble. It's sad that we're there. But even way before that, you rewind to the early days of iMessage, I was irate. I remember ranting about this on the podcast, saying, this isn't right. What Apple is doing is technically very good, like in the sense that using data makes sense, like WhatsApp does too. But they did it such a way that it was breaking, because it was breaking Android. Like, and that's why I was so against it. I was like, you can't do that. It's not a standard. And unfortunately, a lot of things have gone away from standards since then, as you know. But back then, that was a big deal. And also the fact that you have to disable the whole thing if you want to switch to Android or whatever. I mean, this to me seemed like Apple could have done, I think, a better job somehow. I think they should have made just a pure VoIP data-driven thing that doesn't integrate with texting. And people have switched anyway, right? Because, I mean, they're like, and then they could have made an Android version, but of course that was never going to happen.
But, I always think the way they went upon it is exactly the way many of these failed Google attempts should have gone, the exact same way. Like, so like with Apple integrating it directly into your messaging app, there was no going around it. You were going to use it or not. Like, you're going to have iMessage or you're going to use SMS, and you didn't really know what the heck those two different bubbles. It was like the gateway drug,
right? Like, you started sending a text message and you were on iMessage, and all of a sudden you had the blue bubbles and you were in business.
That's what I'm saying, though, is that the reason why I think Google's messaging ones fail, because they never forced it upon their users. Now, we saw with, we had Google Allo, we had Google Hangout, we had so many, right? But every single one of them, they had the technology behind it, but it was never forced really upon it, because we still use Google Messages or Samsung Messages or whatever messaging service your phone came with. And I think that was the biggest downfall, because Apple forced it upon users, and then it became what you were like you knew that was a regular, that's how it's going to go down. I never had an issue. I never thought about downloading another app. So I think that was to me the biggest problem. And I always go back to this. I know Android is this free open platform, but sometimes you need to do certain things. I mean, now we're seeing with Google Messages, and now they're saying you need to kind of have that as a main messaging one now for more devices in America. Like with Samsung, it's like we're using that, OnePlus, all that fun stuff. But it's a little bit too late. And this kind of goes down to the next part where you're talking about, like, what can we do? That there's so many. I've talked about this on my own page, being like, Android's in big trouble in the next coming years, and people want to say that, well, not coming years, like coming, let's say, decades, if anything is still at the same way they have now with smartphones and all that, because this next generation, my generation and generation below that, none of them are buying Android phones. Yeah, nobody is.
So, do you think, at least, your audience, you have probably a much broader audience in terms of tech savvy versus more like, mainstream than I do. Like, my audience is global, but is a little older, younger than me, but older than you. Yeah. It's mostly men, although I'm trying really hard to include women in my show to get more, women listeners, hopefully. But in terms of user base, most of my podcast is listened to on Apple Podcasts,
Mhm.
even though we spend most of our time discussing Android on the show. So it's interesting to see the numbers, right? Because you're like, okay. But just to kind of summarize, I think for me, what's interesting is your audience might be not necessarily as tech savvy. Do you think that things like folding phones and other form factors could potentially sway people if Apple doesn't do it? Because Apple right now does not look interested in doing a folding phone at all.
I mean, I've talked about foldable phones quite a bit, and they have quite a bit of traction. Most of the phones I talk about on my page. I see it more with the flip style phones and the folding style phones.
I agree.
Where the younger generation, I mean, on TikTok, not just myself, but with other creators making content, everybody's like, this flip phone's like the one that makes me want to change. But the problem is that when they do change, it's not a great experience going from I would say, flagship level iPhone to a flip style Samsung
100%.
phone.
Yep.
And I think that is, to me, the marketing for the flip is good and bad because they want to pitch it as this creator's dream phone. But then you don't have the camera specs to back it up. You don't have the battery to back it up. And it's like people are switching from a flagship iPhone to this and they're expecting the same experience. Inherently, it's never going to be the same experience. It's just because of the size of the device and what they're able to put into it. But I have been seeing a big sway in terms of how people are reacting to folding phones. But I don't think it's going to be the one that takes the cake and really changes what people my age are buying. And it all goes back down to what we have in software with Apple and what they've caused people's preconceived notions to be and how they go. It's I wouldn't even say it's ecosystem. I think it's the fact that it just works, right?
Yeah.
And I will always say on Android, you can do anything an iPhone can do really at this point. Everybody has their own versions. They all do the same stuff. But when you have Apple forcing you to do certain things, that becomes what you're used to. And if you're not forced to do those same things, and you're not kind of like the software is making you go about doing them, like saying, as I said, with iMessage or FaceTime, it's like, Google, you have to kind of like, toggle on RCS and do this and do that. Well, that's like something as a person switching between devices, I can see how people might not want to switch to that. It's just, there has to be some sort of basis that Google implements to make manufacturers have a similar experience across their devices to make it more simplified, but make it so you don't want to leave.
Yeah. I think I would like to add to what you said earlier, that switching from a flagship iPhone to a flagship flip folding phone is a bad experience. I agree. My spouse experienced that. They both have an iPhone and a Z Flip because we have two phone numbers, two residences, two countries. They wanted to try it. They really love the form factor, but they really hate Android. They really hate the complication of using it. But the other thing is, I would argue that switching from a flagship iPhone to even a normal non-flip flagship Android is a bad experience. And this is coming from me as an Android user. I am highly acutely aware of the things you just talked about. First of all, it depends on the flavor of Android, what experience you have, right?
Yeah.
Like Samsung is different from Google, which is different from Moto and OnePlus. Let's pick US centric devices here. Like just the differences alone. Like when you try, if you tell your friend, if you an iPhone user, not you, Miles, but you an iPhone user, tell your friend, hey, this is how you attach a photo to your email. You can walk them through that, and it's going to be the same on every iPhone, right? Pretty much, unless they have a really old version of iOS.
Of course.
And on Android, it's like, what platform are you on? Because Google does this different than Samsung, than OnePlus. I've run into this so many times now, where I'm like trying to explain to people how to do something, and they're like, I don't see any of that. And I'm like, oh.
Well, that's what I think the inherent issue is that every one of these devices are slightly different on the way they do certain things on their own platforms. And I always say it's like this is just what comes with Android. Like, let's be, this is what happens when you have an open source platform that you can do whatever you want and you can do whatever you like your company wants to do. But I think that hurts it. Like, I really, to me, think that hurts the way people experience devices. Because whenever I say, people are like, if I want to switch to an Android phone, what do I want to switch to? I was like, if you want the smoothest experience from the way you're used to the way you're doing it now, I was like, go Pixel any day. Like, that's
100%.
To me, it's the easiest transition. If you want something that's a little bit more everything in the kitchen sink, go Samsung. But like other platforms, it's like you can, but then I also have to think about, can you get this phone repaired if you want to? What is going to be the back end? How is the daily user experience across different apps like? And this is the part that's really hard, because you can have the best specs on any phone, but if the inherent base usability is not easy and comprehensible, that ruins the experience. I that's what I always say. And I think that going back to like you're saying the flagship one, I think the flagship ones, regular slab phones, are an easier switch than the flip. I just think the flip is it's hard for somebody to go, unless they're going from an older iPhone. If they're going from like a 14 Pro, or like a 13 Pro, and you're going to a flip, you will see the disadvantages instantly. You're going from like let's say a 10, 11 to a flip. Then you're like, yeah, it's not that big of a difference. But like when you're getting up to those newer ones where people are buying because they're on those 2-year or 3-year contracts, and they're seeing this phone, they're like, this is so cool. It's such a new feature set. And they get it. They're like, why does the front camera look like this? Oh, well, like you can use the rear cameras. I'm like, but no, that's a whole nother thing. I was like, every time I talk to manufacturers and they're like, why do you care about front facing cameras? I'm like, you do not realize how important it is, more important to me and many people than the rear camera most of the time, because they're using that front camera so often.
Right. Yeah. Especially if you do selfie TikTok stuff, right? Like, I mean, you want the best possible camera in the front.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. And I was talking to some people about it. It's just like the flip. It's like, I get it. You can take the photo on the other screen. But at the same time, I want the experience to look great on the front camera, on those 2 rear cameras when I want to take a selfie with that. I don't want to have to rely on that outside screen, because, hey, if I'm doing, as you said, recording on Instagram or recording on TikTok, if I'm doing like that, and I'm using the front facing camera, I'm sorry, I'm not getting the same quality. It looks subpar.
100%.
You can go on that rear set of cameras and it looks great, but I think until those flip styles become at the same caliber as those flagship slab phones, then it'll be a better conversation. But it just, right now, I don't think it's gonna be changing many people over to Android, even though it is a cool style and people are very interested. I've seen a lot of videos of people saying when they switched over, it wasn't the best time.
So here's my thought. Like, I think you're right. Like, this is not going to change. I think iPhone is going to dominate in North America for years to come.
Yeah.
But I also have seen, because I've been around long enough now, how old things come back, or things that are, at the fringe, aka Android in this case, because that, 5 years from now, it'll really be at the fringe, I think, are like cool again, right? They're like, oh, you're being different. You're not going with the herd. And I think in that sense, that plus folding phones that I don't think they're going away. I think they're going to become much better. And I think that eventually it won't matter whether you buy a slab or a folding phone.
They're going to be identical.
Right?
Yeah, no, we've
seen this with the Open, right? The Open is almost as good as a regular phone.
Or the Honor V2. It's like they're getting to the point. Well, it's a negligible difference in terms of like performance between the devices. And I completely agree with that. And I've been seeing, if it's from Motorola for the Razr, they're targeting very much different type of influences for the promotion of their device. They're doing more lifestyle and kind of going back to that, look how cool this is, like change your style and things like that. And it's very interesting to see because, history does repeat itself. But the problem is that person might switch then. Will they stay there in a year or two?
Yeah, it's a very different question. I mean, I'm not even thinking about a year or two. I'm thinking 5 years from now, like there'll be like this resurgence of like, we want to be cool and different, and we don't care about iMessage because we're all using goggles and glasses anyway, But
no, I'm saying though, like if that person switches to that device in 5 years, I'm not saying like in 1 or 2. I'm like saying in 5 years, are they going to have the software in place to make them want to stay there? That's what I'm saying.
That's a very big question. Yeah, we don't know.
Like, to me, I mean, I've talked to so many people that are older than me about this issue, and they're like, we don't understand. I'm like, you guys do not understand how much push just like a collective voice is. Like, some people just don't realize, and they're like, well, why should we be worrying about that? Why should we worry about the front facing camera? Why should we worry about third-party things? Why should we worry about all this stuff? I'm like, you guys don't realize that little taste that they have, and it's bad, they will switch immediately, especially with Gen Z, like my generation. Like, if they don't like something, they will do whatever they want to get away from that. So,
yeah. So yeah, I mean, we don't know, and it's a thing. I want to move on to the news items, but I'll put the story from Android Police from Will Saddleberg in the show notes, folks. Read it. It's a good read. Will's a great writer. It's a little long, but bear with it because I think it's going to give you. If you don't really understand this, I think Miles's audience really understands this, but those of you who might be listening to my show more regularly might be rolling your eyes every time you hear about this. This is an eye-opening article for those of you who don't understand this. So that's why I included it. And I figured Miles would be a really interesting person to talk to about this because we are from a different generation. So there you go. Let's talk about OnePlus 12 because it's coming out. Now we know the official launch date is December 5th in China. Yeah. And we have the official colors. So which one is your favorite official color?
I do like, I say the marble and the green. I'm always a fan of the jade green colorways. I had it on the Open. I didn't have it on the 10T because 10T, they didn't give me that colorway. But I really like that. And I've been lately feeling that OnePlus is making resurgence in terms of listening to their consumer base on what they want and really going back to that. I wouldn't say flagship killer, but an affordable flagship that provides specs and support that they used to have in the past, right? I feel like the years after, I think it was the 7 Pro and like to the 9 Pro, it was a weird gray period. People were leaving, people were joining, and they didn't know what they wanted to do, yet they were charging flagship price for a device that should not be charging at a flagship price. But after using the OnePlus 11 and the OnePlus Open, I kind of like, okay, wait, this is like feeling like older OnePlus again. And the devices feel good. They don't feel cheap. They feel premium. They're offering feature sets that I like. And overall, even though I know the software is not what Oxygen OS really was in the past, I always forget the names of everything.
It's gotten way better.
It's gotten way better.
Yeah, it's gotten way better.
And this OnePlus 12, seeing from what the leaks are saying and seeing the colorways, is like, I think it's good. It's all dependent on the price and distribution and how people get it, though.
For sure. I'm excited about the white. I mean, I've got the green jade or whatever it's called Open. I love it. I love the green colorway that OnePlus has. It
looks so good.
It's fantastic. I've got the earbuds. I had the tablet. The pad or whatever it's called. Anyway, the point is, but this white somehow has really got me excited. I have a thing for white phones ever since the Note 3, I think, which was one of the first white phones you can get in the US. But the other thing that is, this is not confirmed, but so we know the colors for sure. We know the launch date in China. The next two things are not as confirmed. One is that the cameras are going to be identical to the OnePlus Open or Oppo Find N3. Not surprised about that. But the other one is that the launch date might be in late January. According to somebody in India, it looks like we're looking at the 23rd or 24th. So two questions for you is, first of all, I mean, I assume you're not really too upset about the cameras. I'm not. I think this is great. If you don't want a folding phone, you want to spend less money, you want a slab with the same cameras, the cameras are so good, right? So, yeah. And the other thing I was going to ask you about is, beyond the cameras, how do you feel about that 7 weeks or whatever? It kind of drives me nuts, honestly.
I think, we see it from other companies too, other than just like OnePlus. I hate when they announce a device and then you don't hear anything about it for till like a month or two after. And I just think when a product is launched or like announced, right, that should have a timeline of a week or two after when people start getting into their hands. Because I feel like you got to keep that hype train going for that month, right? So when it's like, say 7 weeks and you're going through December and all that stuff, when a lot of things are happening in just every part of every category, I think it kind of will lose a little bit of its flair until it comes back, because we just have a lot of things. As you said, everything got pushed up. Literally everything got pushed up.
Well, I think for us creators, it's a problem because, if Ben Sin goes to Hong Kong and gets the OnePlus 12 and does a video. Like, no offense, I love Ben. I'm actually really looking forward to his video, to be honest. But like, I'm just using Ben as an example, not as I'm not scapegoating him or anything here. But it's just more like, where's the magic for you when you get your OnePlus 12 and you have a huge audience? Or for me, when I review it for Hot Hardware, which will probably what is going to happen, right? I mean, yes, there are some things that are software specific that we need to test on the US model. For me, Hot Hardware is really high on benchmarking and performance. So I'm going to be running all the benchmarks, doing, things like, stability tests, like running games for a long time to see the thermals and stuff. But that's not as exciting to me as the kind of the big reveal, which is going to happen 7 weeks earlier, right? It's just like, ugh.
I think this kind of goes. I know I'm bringing this is bringing up Apple again in a sense that
that's fine.
Yeah, I just this brings up the whole thing. It's kind of going back to the updates thing. Is that when you have a product or software drop all at the same exact time and everybody's experiencing at the same exact time, people want to know about it. When you spread it across different updates, if that might be Samsung, or if that might be some things with the carriers, when your devices get updated over the course of months, people aren't as hyped up for that update because they don't have it yet, right? If you launch a device and it's coming to one market at one time and you have some people talking about it, but not that many people, you're not having that big push that you probably would want, which I think is inherently not a smart marketing move. Right. You want as much push from every person possible to have that news coverage for that X amount of time. Now, you might be saying, well, we spread it out, we can have more news, but there's always something else coming out in between. So say somebody talks about some new product at the end of the year when the China launch happens. Well, then you just got your first news cycle pretty much done because you don't have the biggest creators talking about it. Right. So that was already half the things out. And then come later in the year, who knows what might be coming out at the same exact time.
Yeah,
right?
I think, look, having worked with Chinese companies as a consultant, like, I don't think that the Western branches of OnePlus and Xiaomi and all the others can do anything about this. China is going to do China, and they're going to dictate the terms. And what I think, I'm not quite sure how to resolve this problem, short of maybe getting us devices at the same time as China with early software, maybe, something like that. But it's a hassle, and it's not ideal. Marketing wise, it's a disaster. Absolutely. I agree with you. But I don't think we can change that. Like, China's just going to do their thing, Yeah,
I mean, it's not even only China now. This is swaying away from phones. We see it in car manufacturers. We see it with South Korea. We see it with Germany. They have the cars for a year before they give it to the US market, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, well, dang. Like, say I'm looking at a new car and then I can see it in Europe and I'm like, well, I need a car now. It's like, well, now I know there's a new one coming out. Then it's the same thing with smartphones. It's like, oh my God, like, why are y'all spreading this so far along? Like, I want to know about it now. I want to learn about it, but I can't because either it's a different type of device that's slightly different for a different market, or nobody's talking about it. And there's some people that might have it in the Western market because they go get it from the Chinese market. It's just, I don't think it's a smart move. I never think it is. And we see some manufacturers that realize that, like Apple does. They launch it everywhere. Samsung now is doing it more like launching everywhere. I mean, they kind of did a little bit of things in the past, but I mean.
But notice Samsung is a Korean company, not a Chinese company.
Oh,
I think this is really right now, in the last few years, that gap has grown. And it's mostly around the Chinese flagships.
Yeah.
Not to mention all the Chinese flagships we don't get. Like, sometimes they keep the best to themselves, like the Ultra for the Xiaomi, right? So the next one I have is, like, we're going to stay on BBK Group for a little bit here. The Realme GT5 Pro. So now this is something we'll never see in North America, but it's going to be a global launch eventually. It's coming on December 7th. I believe it's China only. I should be getting a device. I don't know if it's a global or Chinese model. But what's interesting to me here, Miles, and I kind of want your thoughts on this, is, I'll put a link to the charging specs leaked, and obviously, the GT non-Pro is a 240 watt charging, right? So it's got a lot more oomph, but this is 100 watt, but it does include 50 watt wireless charging, which I think is the first time Realme is doing wireless charging on any device. Actually, this is the first time that Realme is kind of in the Oppo OnePlus territory of making a flagship. It's supposed to have a massive IMX890 telephoto here for the camera system, so periscope camera. So my point is, we've never seen Realme go that high end.
Yeah.
And of course, if they're doing wireless and wired, they're not going to put the 240 watt in there. I'm not surprised. But what's your take on Realme kind of cozying up to their siblings, OnePlus and Oppo, with a flagship that seems really high end and might not come to the global market?
I think we've been seeing that across, I feel like, the BBK Group. I mean, at first, like, Oppo was like the flagship, then OnePlus started like slowly becoming the same thing, right? And they started sharing designs and all that. And with Realme coming in, I'm guessing it will be a slightly cheaper price point as they have more of the affordable offering. I don't think it's bad at all. It's another
$500
option.
is what we're hearing for this thing.
Yeah,
Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, crazy cameras, wireless. I mean, wow, right?
That's a good spec sheet.
China,
I don't think it's China, of course. But I would rather have competition than not competition, even if it might be under the same company brand, because as we've seen in the past, and as we're not really seeing it in America anymore, competition breeds innovation and it breeds better products. We don't really have that happening as much in the US, I feel like, because we don't get many of these Chinese phones into America, which is very, just to me, sad, because there's really only 4 main flagships here, and one of them is not really a main flagship because it's not sold at carrier stores.
Right.
And I don't think it's bad. I think it's a good thing to have because it just gives people more options. And I would hope, because they're under the BBK group, that they would have I would hope they would have similar software. So if you were to upgrade,
so if you've ever used a Realme, it's exact same as ColorOS.
Yeah,
I have. It's called Realme UI, but it's almost, you can put it side by side and it's ColorOS.
Well, that's almost like we look at. I always go back to cars because it's very similar in how they do all this stuff. You have like Lexus and Toyota. Toyota kind of gives you almost the Lexus experience, but if you want to go a little bit higher end, you can. So it'll be like Realme to Oppo, like in China. So like, oh, I want to go a little bit more high end. I'm gonna go to the Oppo devices. It's similar software, just a different type of name, but the same thing, right? So I don't see a problem with it at all.
Cool. So the next one we have, I forgot to mention this entire phone line last week. It was actually came out in time for last week's show, and I kind of completely forgot that to include it. It's the Oppo Reno 11 series. So the Reno has always been the upper mid-range or the mid-range meat of the Oppo lineup. Like if you have money and you live in India or whatever, you will buy the fine series, right? The flagship. But if you want the best bang for your buck, still get like close to flagship specs, but want to spend a little less money, the Reno series. And the Renos, they literally come out with a new one every 6 months. Like we just got the Reno 10 not long ago. I used to have them all, and after the Reno 8, I lost it. I was like, I can't do this anymore. So send me every other one now.
Because, I mean, people ask me about it. I unfortunately don't get all those devices because they ask me about, what about Oppo? What about Realme? What about Xiaomi? What about Huawei? And I was like, I don't get those devices mainly because of my market where I'm based in, obvious reasons. But yeah, no, Oppo, I always forget how big Oppo is overall in different countries and how many devices that they sell. They're huge because people ask me about it all the time. And I'm like, I wish I could talk about it, but the only equivalent I have is OnePlus, which you guys don't have, right? Because that's almost like a rebadge version in most of the cases of a Oppo flagship, which isn't bad. I don't mind that for like the more American and Europe markets. So, I mean, I've never really heard bad things about Oppo. I feel like they've been really stepping up their game in many different price categories. And I have been hearing about Reno, but I don't talk about them or get hands-on with them ever. I've actually never touched one before.
Yeah, I mean, they're interesting. They're not like my go-to, but like you look at the specs here, we're looking at Dimensity 8200 for the 11 and for the 11 Pro, interestingly, a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1. So they're really saving money there. I mean, that's a solid chip still, but like they're not going quite as high end as they've done with some of the Renos in the past.
Yeah.
The camera systems are okay, but nothing spectacular. It's interesting because some years, or I should say some 6 month periods, because it's every 6 months, the Renos are really standing out. Like the 8 was awesome. The 10 was great. But sometimes the odd numbers seem to just be like, oh, we need to just relaunch a bunch of phones. Like, because this doesn't seem like they're putting much effort into it. But I just wanted to mention it because I know a lot of you are in markets where this phone is sold right now. So if you like your Reno, the latest models have come out in China only for now. India's probably like within weeks.
Behind,
yeah. And that's a big phone in India, the Reno series. So keep an eye out for it if it's your thing. I just wanted to mention it quickly because I forgot last week. The next thing from BBK Group is the iQ12 that also came out a couple of weeks back, and I didn't catch it. The reason I put that back in, at first I was like, it's IQ, whatever you call it, EQ, IQ. I don't know how you say that. It's Vivo's sub-brand. So you know how Oppo has OnePlus and then Realme is kind of its own separate thing, but it's really part of Oppo. Vivo has its sub brand, which is IQ, EQ, whatever.
Yeah.
The 12 is a flagship. So that's the reason, like, I looked at the specs and I'm like, wait a minute, this thing is insane. Look at the specs on this thing. It's like almost as good as a Vivo X series imaging flagship. It's got some crazy features. Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. It's got a Quad HD AMOLED LTPO display. It's got like tons of RAM and storage. Cameras are multi-megapixel, 64 megapixel. Telephoto, that sound familiar to you? OnePlus Open?
We've been seeing a little mix of them. I did see this device.
It's a 3x optical periscope. I wonder why. 50 megapixel ultra wide. Then, what's the main sensor on that? A 50 meg. Oh, so it's interesting. This is the first time we've seen a large size sensor from OmniVision, which usually makes kind of crap sensors. So I'm wondering if they're finally realizing that they need to compete with Samsung and Sony sensors, and testing this out with this camera. So we'll see. I'm getting a device soon, so they haven't sent me an EQ in a while, but I figured I'd try to get this one, and so I'll let you know how that main camera works out. But what are your thoughts on this? I love the design. It looks cool, right?
It looks. I would say it doesn't look too plain, but it also kind of has a little bit more sophisticated look. It's taking pieces. I could see. We could see the camera array looks very similar to other devices from like OnePlus and all that, but like only like slightly different change to it. But the specs look. This is my first time looking. I've seen pictures. I haven't really looked at the specs of this. Look quite top notch. I mean, it's not really missing much of anything. And I'm guessing it's using that new screen from BOE. Is it BOE? Yeah, BOE.
Yeah, it's BOE. Probably the same screen we're seeing in the OnePlus 12.
Yeah, I mean, it looks exactly like the same.
Fine X7, yeah. It's interesting to me because I love that red, like red and gold, I think it is. Is that what it looks like? No, maybe it's silver.
I think
it's hard to tell if it's a gold, but anyway.
I do like the red.
Oppo, the Find X2 Pro a few years back was available with a kind of reddish, like vegan leather and gold actual metal frame. It was so hot looking. I kind of want that to come back, I guess. But yeah, this thing has everything. There's wireless charging here at 50 watt, wired charging at 100 watt. I mean, like, this is what I'm saying. I saw the specs. I'm like, okay, EQ has come close to doing Vivo level performance and specs, but this is right in the Vivo meat.
Without the camera sensor, really glass. It seems like.
Right. So China only for now. So hopefully I think the global is coming soon again. This is one of the first 8 Gen 3 phones. That's part of the reason I want it too. Is because right now I'm trying to get all my PR reps to race against each other, Miles. I've got this phone potentially coming. They haven't confirmed. I have the Red Magic 9 Pro potentially coming, the one that was announced last week. We talked on the podcast last week. Because I'm trying to get my hands on 8 Gen 3.
I wish. I used to get devices from Red Magic, and then one of them got stolen. They didn't want to work with me again.
Oh no, that's not your fault.
Oh, I know. The package was stolen and all that. I still made the video for them because I got someone to give me the Red Magic 7 Pro. Or it was the last one, but whatever the last one was, that brought that new form factor.
The 8 Pro. Oh, so hot.
So I got the 8 Pro.
Doesn't it feel like the phone from the future in your hand? The bezels are so small. It's so rectangular. I love it. Yeah.
But I haven't gotten, I didn't get the 8S Pro, and I don't think I'm getting the 9 Pro. And I was like, I didn't have much of a choice with getting stolen. But all right.
I felt bad because they sent me an 8S Pro, and I keep telling them, like, I can't do 2 Red Magic reviews a year, like, because I have so many other things on my plate. And so send me the main ones every year, like the new chip, right? Because the S was just a slightly tweaked version. And I felt bad. I never even took it out of the box. Like, I sent it right back. But I can't, because I generally review them for hot hardware because, again, specs, gaming, performance.
People love the phone.
And they're sold in the US. They're officially supporting US carriers. That's a big deal.
I've talked about Red Magic phones, and they've garnered a ton of views because people are like, this is so interesting. And they always want me to compare it to the ROG phones too. And I think it's interesting. The only problem I see is that on the American market, they do jack the price up a little bit compared to what it's sold in different markets. But I mean, people are always interested because it's always like the bleeding edge in terms of performance, cooling, and what they can get out of those chips when the first ones come out. It always seems like the one that actually holds up without a bunch of throttling just due to weak cooling solutions.
Oh, you can turn off the fan on that phone and it'll still do like 99.9 performance all day long. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. The last couple of items are really a bunch of items kind of lumped together. The K series from Redmi, the flagship K70 now, is out. And there is a whole bunch here. Like there's a 70, a 70 Pro, a 70E with a Dimensity 9300, whereas a 70 Pro has a 8 Gen 3. There's a 70 Pro Lamborghini edition with a different industrial design to match the Lamborghini brand. And then finally, there's rumors, which are pretty accurate because this is literally historically been every year the case, that the Redmi K series abroad, like in Asian markets, comes out in the West as the Poco X series, right? So the Poco X6 Pro will probably be the Redmi K70E. The E is the one with the Dimensity 9300. So I generally get all of these. So I will let you know which of the K70 they sent me. I'm trying to figure out which base chip the non-Pro and non-E model have. Hang on, I'm just looking at that right now. The industrial design is slightly different than them. Oh, okay. So it's 8 Gen 2 on the K70 and then 8 Gen 3 on the K70 Pro. Interesting.
That's not bad.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on these? Are you into the Redmis? Have you tried them yet?
I'm telling you, any phone that's probably not sold in the US, I have not gone hands-on with. But I appreciate and notice a lot with these collaborations with these Chinese brands. And I don't understand why we don't get a lot of those. Like we had Red Magic with Transformers. We have Redmi with the Pro Series. We had Huawei back in with Porsche Design, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those ones. And I think... I don't know how these phones would sell in the American market, but I'm like, whenever somebody talks about it, because I forgot they had the Coca-Cola one and they had the Harry Potter one, and people.
Oh, that was Realme. I have it.
Realme,
awesome.
The Harry Potter. People love that, and they it garners so much attention. I'm like, where did you get this? Oh my god! And just like knowing some people, they will just buy it just because of that, right? So I like to see collaborations. I mean, the K70 Pro, it looks like it reminds me a lot of the Neo. The one made by the car company, the Neo flagship, very similar design, not as rounded, but like camera array and all that.
That camera array looks almost like the Neo's camera array for sure. Yeah.
But I mean, it's cool to see. And I still wish a lot of these would come to America, just because I said competition wise, because like 4,000 nits of brightness.
They're really like, I think there's a brightness war happening. I think that I'm going to be writing the word seared eyes in my reviews a lot.
It has to be, because some of these just make no sense. Like, is it really that bright at all? And
but the pricing seems pretty much on top. I mean, Redmi is the competitive value brand of Xiaomi. And honestly, these phones, like you look at the 70 Pro here, metal frame, you can see the antenna bands. That's how I know. It's got a crazy Quad HD display. It's got co-developed with TCL. How interesting is that?
Yeah, that's what I was reading there too.
And then
that's interesting.
Got, like multi-megapixel, like it has a 50 megapixel telephoto in addition to the 50 megapixel main. The only thing that's kind of iffy there is the 12 megapixel ultra wide. 120 watt charging. I mean, the thing is insane. And then the price is like $465 starting point, which is China only, of course, right now. So, but look, I think it's interesting.
I was gonna say, it's just, to me, it's crazy how a lot of these American phones, we see every Chinese phone just boosting higher and higher charging speeds, and we only really see OnePlus, because OnePlus is inherently a Chinese company, right? Not following suit, and I'm just kind of like, I mean, we always say they have the battery degradation, like according to their testing. I mean, who really knows? I haven't used a device long enough with that charging tech to see if it really degrades faster than they say. But I'm like, why has none of that really reached the US? Like, I mean, for a majority of devices, I just feel like the charging speed like war that we had maybe like a year ago, that's like kind of like plateaued, I feel like, hasn't come to the US market yet. Like, I
think because Americans are really set in their ways. They will charge overnight no matter what.
Yeah.
So then does it really matter? And also, I think, I think in markets like India, your phone is your main device, like
Yeah.
absolute your main device, right? And so you're going to carry your charger around with you, even if the charger is a little bulky and special, so you can get that fast speed because you might be in an area where the power is iffy. So if the power grid goes down, you don't have charge. So you want to charge quickly while you have power, things like that, right? And then you combine that with the basically what I called opportunistic charging, right? So then you combine that with the fact that the Western kind of customer is used to charging overnight, has reliable power, and more importantly, wants to use kind of standardized power supplies like PD based, right?
Yeah.
You can't do you can do 240 watt PD. It
No,
exists.
but
But
it's
the
really
problem
expensive.
is not on a phone. So right now, anything over 66 watt basically on a phone is some sort of proprietary charger, right? Like
Yeah.
OnePlus does make a charger that is proprietary, but then if you plug in it into like a MacBook, it supports PD up to 60 watts. So there are some chargers out there that are dual mode, but my point is, generally speaking, I think most iPhone users are still charging at 5 watts, Miles. I guarantee you, 100%.
Most likely.
Like unless they bought like a MagSafe thing or, but they probably have like a very dusty little
5
like
watt brick
Apple
that they're
brick
using.
sitting in the back, unless they
Oh,
bought
man.
I'm not lying, right? Like it's
No,
probably
you're not.
true.
You're not.
So
People
my
are
point
still
is-
getting the 18 watt fast charging brick as if it's like a whole new
I
revolution
know.
still.
So what I think is happening is we're so set in that overnight charging at slow charge speeds that we don't need to opportunistically charge as much, right? Because
Yeah.
we don't have the pressures that other markets experience. So that's kind of why I think this is happening. I think that even in Europe, people don't really charge like in the middle of the day unless they're really low, kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We'll see what happens. What I find interesting here with these phones is that, Redmi making phones with metal frames, like they're going kind of up market in terms of design. I mean, for them. And it's kind of interesting to me, right? Like they're not skimping. This is cool.
No.
So
Yeah, I mean, I like to see everything get more premium, but I also don't want these companies to leave what they are built up in terms of a consumer base, like leave that market that they were supplying, right?
Yeah.
So we'll just have to see.
for sure. But the K70E seems to be the kind of the more affordable, even though it's got a pretty awesome chipset, a Dimensity 8300, it seems to be more budget oriented. Like it doesn't have the crazy camera system or the crazy display, and it's a lot more affordable, starting out at $280 US.
It's really
Speaking of Xiaomi and Poco and generally that brand, I'm using a phone right now that's really interesting. I'll just pull it out so people can see. I don't know if it will show up there.
Oh, I can see
It is Poco C65, $109 US.
That's it.
And it does everything a phone should do. It's kind of amazing. 5,000 milliamp hour battery. Good. It's got the display it looks good, but it's only 720p and it's 90 hertz.
But but for $100.
But if I bring it up, look, this is in bright sunlight right now. Not bad, right?
I mean,
A lot of
if somebody's buying
reflections.
that,
But that's not a bad quality display. The colors are sharp. There's contrast is good. Then it's got a Helio, so 4G chipset. That's not going to be crazy, but it does have 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. And it does have micro SD, and it does have a headphone jack, and it does have NFC, so you can do Google Pay.
and you know what's crazy to me?
$9.
What's crazy to me is that we will never get this in the US, and people that are buying phones that are on the cheaper end are getting these devices that are inherently a whole lot worse.
I know the G series from Moto is way worse in my opinion.
I think it's crazy to me because Motorola, they have been like, of course, the more budget end option, but like they are not cheap for what they're like giving these devices nowadays. Like it's like the specs are not matching the price, especially when you see manufacturers like Poco giving these devices pretty decent hardware, which you should probably get in this day of age, right? And it kind of hurts because like no one, it's that first impression. It's like if that was like a phone for $109, did you buy it Measure PCS or Straight Talk or Mint Mobile and stuff like that, and you just need a good phone that's cheap, it's like you don't have many good options at that price point at all.
And let me tell you, at 5,000 milliamp hour battery on a 4G chipset, that thing will run 3 days on a battery.
Oh,
Okay?
easily.
Like, it's unbelievable. And the other thing is the camera is actually not too bad. It's a 50 megapixel. There's also a 2 megapixel macro, and the third sensor actually exists, but we don't really know what it does. Like, Poco has
Sounds like a
given
price
us
at that price.
Poco has given us 0 specs. At first, I thought it was just a fake, but Poco actually tells us, no, we wouldn't do that. So it's probably like a VGA depth sensor or something. The point is, though, if if you look at my Instagram, folks, I will have some photos posted with that phone. It falls apart a little in low light, but it does pixel binning. It doesn't have OIS, of course. But honestly, the quality, the 2x zoom on it is actually really clean. And overall brightness, color, exposure, balance, all that stuff is sorted. And you're thinking $109, right? Now, I think mine is the 8 gig 256, which I think is $129.
That's not even
but I mean,
bad,
come
though.
on, like, okay, like, and I think those are the initial sale prices because Poco always does that. Like the first month, they're a little cheaper.
Yeah.
But I think the regular price is $129 or $139 on the base 6 gig 128 model. And I think it goes up to $159 for the 8 256. As this is like after the sales. But right now, you can buy the 6 gig version for $109, which honestly, like, if I was completely screwed and I needed a phone, this is it.
It's not
Like,
bad.
it is not frustratingly slow. Like, it is definitely not flagship fast, but it's not pissing me off when I use it, Miles, which
That's
considering
to me,
what I have in my pockets every day is kind of incredible, right?
I mean, to me, that's how I determine a device. If a device is good, it's one that's not annoying me when I'm using it. If it's annoying me when I'm using it, no matter what price it is, I was like, no, can't do it. Goes from earbuds to phones to any tech product I use. And I'll straight up be people. I was like, this is what you expect. This is what you're gonna get. This is how I liked or didn't like it. If it was so bad that I did not like using it, or it didn't fit into my daily routine, it's like I can't really endorse or tell you to buy it. But if something like that, $109 that you're using is doing the basic things right, it's not bad.
See, Poco's been making a string of these really affordable entry-level phones that didn't suck. So when they announced this, I'm like, can I please? Because I'm like, I want to see where we're at, right? Because not everybody buys a flagship, at least not in other markets in the world, right? Like in Africa, people are not going to buy a flagship, okay? So it's very important, I think, for us as reviewers to kind of set a minimum bar, right? And understand what that minimum bar looks like, right? And that's why if it's going to be a sucky experience like the Moto Gs, and I'm sorry to say this for the Motorola folks who are listening, but I think you need to optimize the software better on these Moto Gs because that's the biggest problem. Like this thing is slow, but not sluggish. Like you have to slow down your roll when you're using it.
Well,
but
that's
you
what I'm
don't
saying.
feel like it's like lagging. You know what I'm saying?
But a 120 hertz display without actually optimizing it won't help the speed feeling on the phone. Like you can say the specs wise and all that. And I mean, I haven't used the most recent Motorola flagships, but I've used Motorola's in the past. Maybe it's changed a tiny bit, but they might be boasting these crazy good specs and the flagships are like mid-range ones. But every time I get them, like it has the same issues it's had years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
This year, the Edges, both the Plus and the regular, are really solid phones. They've done a really good job. I think that we've given them so much feedback, to improve that they've listened. The Razors are also pretty solid, I feel. And I think that they've done a better job. But their G series right now, especially the really cheap ones, like that compete with this, don't have NFC. The cameras are potatoes.
Is such a cheap thing to
They feel really sluggish, like to the point where you don't want to use it. Whereas this, I'm like, every now and then I'm like, okay, this could be better,
and this goes back to what I was saying, right? Why would somebody stay with a company if the experience at the beginning is bad at the cheaper end? That's what I was saying. If you're saying with Oppo and Realme, it's like if they're giving you a similar experience but a higher end version later on, it's like, oh, you're going to stay with that corporation, right? You're going to stay with that product line. But if Motorola is giving you a crappy experience from the beginning, why would somebody want to buy a Motorola flagship when they start to get money?
Exactly. And the nice thing about this phone too is like it doesn't feel cheap. It's well made. It's all plastic, right? Plastic frame.
Nothing's wrong with plastic,
You see? But look at it. It doesn't feel or look cheap. It has this kind of nice little kind of like sparkly finish on the back. And then the camera bump has some kind of design to it, you know, it's
No,
not
I feel
bad.
that.
Like, and I mean, you know, when you first pick it up, you don't feel like, oh my God, this is terrible, you know? Whereas
Yeah, yeah.
some Moto Gs, I'm like, oh my God, it's terrible. Anyway, moving on, Xiaomi 14 Ultra rumors. And really all we know is that the variable aperture, which already exists on the 13 Ultra, I believe, and it also exists as a two choices on the 14 Pro, which we still don't have because it just came out, is going to be more variable steps. So
Yeah.
that's actually pretty exciting to me. When I'm not sure if they're going to a 1-inch sensor or not, like staying with 1-inch sensor, but I'm excited about the Ultra. I mean, last year's Ultra was so good.
I think we're seeing it from, oh my God, I just remember the memes of cameras like getting bigger and bigger on the back of these phones, and they're actually doing exactly that. Not just with like the Xiaomi Ultra, but you see with the like Find X7 Pro, like these camera bumps are getting massive. But
I mean, the OnePlus Open camera bump is ridiculous.
Oh, people got on me. They're like, why is that so big? I was like, it really shouldn't be, but
it's also really good. And
Yeah,
you
it's
have a
good.
really thin phone. So where are you going to put the cameras, right?
Exactly. But
Exactly.
I love to see these different little takes on these new cameras on these flagship devices, like trying to differentiate it with variable apertures and all that stuff. And as we get these bigger sensors, it actually becomes more apparent that you can actually use that feature in more circumstances than we would have for one of those like the S7 when I had like the 2-step variable aperture, when it didn't really do much, if we're being honest. Like,
well, it didn't do much because the sensor was so small. I think
That's
once
what I'm
you
saying,
add,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like once you add a big sensor and then the variable aperture really becomes a thing, right? So, yeah.
Then becomes more useful. It's great to see.
I'm looking forward to this phone, even though they didn't send me the 13 Ultra last year. I hope they send it to me this year. Miles, we should wrap up. Do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet? All your various social media handles, all your various content silos. Please tell the world.
Every single platform that I'm on, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, is all Miles Above Tech. You can find me anywhere on those. I do primarily short form content. So if you guys want bite-sized information about new products, you can find me on anywhere.
And folks, Miles is absolutely awesome. I love his content. I mostly consume you on Insta and YouTube because I don't use TikTok much. And I really love, like, the whole teenager thing. You talked about this on YouTube recently in a short. And I just think you guys should follow Miles. Absolutely. One of the best voices out there for short content. And you know where to find me, folks. I'm at Tankgirl, TNKGRL on most social. That's like the comic book character Tank Girl. You just drop all the vowels, and you'll find me on Twitter/X, on Threads, on Insta, on Blue Sky, and of course, the podcast itself lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on all the major podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Pocket Cast. So please subscribe, tell your friends. If you can rate or review the show in your app, please do so. And YouTube is also a thing for me, a small thing compared to Miles. But for me, it's mostly about unboxing videos and hands-on, like 10-minute video type things. YouTube.com/mobiletech podcast. You know how YouTube works. So like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell, comment, and chat with me and all that stuff. And finally, there's a Patreon as well. Patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's Patreon.com/TNKGRL. If you want to help me out financially, you can get a video version of this podcast in advance, a day or two in advance. You can see Miles. You can see that Poco phone I just showed. And it's very affordable, and that's the big perk I have on Patreon. So consider helping me out with Patreon. There's also other options there. You can also join our Discord server and a bunch of other things. So check out the Patreon, patreon.com/TNKGRL. And if you don't like Patreon, you still want to help out, if you look in the show notes, there's a link to my website, tankgirl.com, TNKGRL.com. And in there is a little button you can press for PayPal donation. I will accept a $5 coffee or more if you'd like to help out. That would be great. I also want to thank our sponsor, Mint Mobile. You know I review a lot of phones, so I'm constantly juggling multiple devices. While that's fun, it also means I'm spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. Thankfully, there's Mint Mobile, and that's who I'm teaming up with for today's podcast. If you want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. You've probably seen the Mint Mobile ads featuring Ryan Reynolds, but let me quickly tell you how fantastic their service is, especially for tech-savvy early adopters like us. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current devices and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM card free of charge. The whole process only takes 15 minutes, and if you get stuck, Mint has a great customer service team to get you through it. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus lightning-fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link, mintmobile.com/mobiletech, to get premium wireless starting at $15 a month. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And I want to thank you, Miles, for being my guest this week. Thanks so much for coming on the show. It was an absolute delight to have you.
Thank you. I enjoyed being on here and talking about all the different topics.
Well, we'll have you at some point again in the future. And folks, we'll have another podcast next week. So stay tuned for that. And until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.